Under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, the Millstone District Court feels more like a holding cell than a place of justice. At 17, Darius Blake stands behind the defense bench, his shoulders tense, legs fixed on the floor. He's charged with felony theft, a watch taken from a neighborhood shop. Yet there are no fingerprints on file, no clear video footage, only the weary testimony of a store clerk and a standard issue 3-paragraph indictment. Across the room, Officer Reed Stanton looms in his pressed uniform, arms folded, badge dull with years on the force. He watches Darius with a look of cold contempt, as if the boy's very presence offends him. The spectators, neighbors, family members, curious onlookers sit frozen. A middle-aged woman near the front covers her mouth in disbelief. A young couple in the back exchange uneasy glances and look away. No one dares to speak. Instead, they watch as the prosecutor, a portly man with a droning voice, reads aloud, Darius's record 3 tardies in high school, now spun into repeated behavioral violations. His words fill the courtroom like a ticking clock marking time until an inevitable verdict. At the defense table, Darius's attorney, a trembling, gray-haired woman, rises to speak. Her voice quavers as she reminds the court that her client has no prior arrests and that teenagers make mistakes. We ask the court to see this for what it is she pleads, a youthful misjudgment, not a criminal pattern. But her words vanish into the hush. In this well-rehearsed ritual, Darius's rights slip away under layers of suspicion and presumption. Fear holds every throat and silence presses down heavier than the steel of his handcuffs. Here in Millstone's courtroom, justice seems less about fairness and more about maintaining order, no matter the cost to one young man's future. Under the dull hum of fluorescent lights, the courtroom's calm ritual splinters when a woman in a dark overcoat appears at the back. She walks in without a badge or announcement, clutching a thick file. Heads swivel, gasps ripple. She moves with quiet purpose, straight toward the defense table and stops. The stenographer's fingers hover above the keys. Clerks glance up from their typing. Even Officer Reed Stanton, who has never been questioned on these polished floors, feels his certainty waver. No one recognizes her name yet. In that instant, her presence speaks volumes. The droning prosecutor halts mid-sentence. The bailiff blinks. Spectators lean forward, curious but cautious, unsure whether to rise or stay seated. In this space where every movement must be sanctioned, her unbidden stride becomes an act of bold defiance. Stanton's jaw tightens. He steps forward, the polished backs of his shoes clicking against the tiled floor. His voice, usually enough to hush a restless gallery, carries a sharp edge. Who do you think you are? His words hang in the still air. She remains silent. Her gaze, calm yet unyielding, never leaves the judge's bench. In that look lies a reminder: authority is not a birthright, and fear is not a law. Her stillness unmasks the courtroom's unspoken rules that only certain people may speak, stand, or enter without permission. No one moves to stop her. No one reaches for her. The defiance in her poise is stronger than any command, and in that charged moment, the courtroom's practiced choreography fractures. The power that rests on fear of a uniform trembles for the first time under the weight of her quiet resolve. Under the sudden crack of his words, the courtroom's measured calm shatters. Officer Stanton steps forward, feet planted like a soldier at parade rest, and snarls, "You people are society's trash." His voice, low and venomous, reverberates off the paneled walls as if fired from a weapon. Across the benches, spectators flinch. A grandmother gasps into a handkerchief. A young teacher bows her head. A businessman stiffens in his seat. Not one soul moves to intervene. Protocol and fear hold them rigid. At that moment, Nora Blake, a woman who arrived unannounced, carrying nothing but truth, raises her hand. She does not shout. She does not tremble. Her gaze, steady and unwavering, settles on the judge's bench. In a voice calm yet measured like the swing of a pendulum, she declares, "You are insulting someone who has not been convicted." She does not address Stanton. Instead, she speaks to the guardian of this chamber, reminding the court that Darius Blake, barely 17, still stands under the protection of due process. Her words carry the gravity of the gavel itself. The judge, an octogenarian with decades on the bench, shifts in his seat, reminded that justice demands balance, not bluster. The bailiff's hand tightens on the rail, the stenographer's fingers hover above the keys, and the prosecutor's practiced composure cracks. By invoking her own authority as police chief and as Darius' sister, Nora forces every witness to confront the raw abuse of power laid bare before them. Across the room, stunned glances flicker between neighbors, families, and fellow officers. This space, long accustomed to scripted motions and predetermined outcomes, has become a crucible of accountability. Even Stanton, whose dominance once silenced entire proceedings, falters. For the first time, fear does not rule the day. Instead, principled defiance fills the air, and in that moment, the courtroom pauses, poised on the edge of true justice. With measured precision, Nora steps forward and places a crisp, notarized document on the bench. Even under those unforgiving lights, the seal gleams. She is Nora Blake, sworn in this very morning, as Millstone's new chief of police. A hush descends heavy enough to stifle the hum of the overhead fan. The man who once stood above the law now finds himself beneath its gaze. Officer Stanton's broad shoulders tighten. His chest rises in a shallow, unsteady breath. His badge, long a symbol of unchecked authority, suddenly feels like dead weight on his uniform arm. The judge, an elder statesman in robes, fumbles for his gavel. With a single resounding strike, he restores order, though none was truly lost. "Officer Stanton," he intones, voice quavering, just enough to betray his own astonishment, "you are held in contempt of this court." From the deputy's belt, a pair of handcuffs emerges cold and unyielding. The metal snaps shut around Stanton's wrists in a sound that echoes like thunder through the chamber. Each click of the chain rings out as an unambiguous rebuke. No badge, no rank, no tradition can shield misconduct once it's laid bare. Stanton rises, uncertainty etched into every line of his face. The deputy's firm grip guides him toward the exit, and with each step, the courtroom's wooden floorboards become the drumbeat of his fall from grace. Spectators watch wide-eyed, some lean forward, mouths agape. Others press hands to their hearts as though fearing they too might be next. Nora remains perfectly still, her expression composed beneath her badge of office. She does not smile. There is no triumph here, only the quiet satisfaction that justice long deferred has finally spoken its name. As the doors close behind Stanton, the chamber holds its breath once more. In that pregnant pause, the unspoken truth settles in every heart. The law answers to no uniform, and today it has proven its power. In the broad corridor outside the courtroom, hushed exclamations swell into a chorus of awe and disbelief. Did you witness that? A voice murmurs, and echoes ripple through the marble halls. Reporters press forward, cameras clicking as they jockey for the perfect shot. Local residents, some with silver hair and familiar faces, pause in their tracks, eyes glistening as they exchange looks of relief and wonder. A few dab at tears with folded program leaflets. Others ball their hands into tight fists, driven by a hard-won sense of vindication. At the counsel's table, prosecutor Victor Harding and the defense attorney maintain a frozen tableau. Their mouths part, then close again, too stunned to form words. Only when the bailiff's gavel tap rings out, court is dismissed until further notice, does reality settle in. One by one, spectators rise, sliding out of the benches in quiet procession, each footstep a testament to the seismic shift they've just witnessed. Nora Blake stands poised in the courtroom doorway, her shoulders squared beneath the weight of her new authority. For a moment, time seems to pause. Then she lifts her chin and meets Officer Stanton's gaze, steady, unwavering, brimming with an unspoken promise of accountability. Neither fear nor malice flickers in her eyes, only the calm knowledge that justice, once dormant, has been roused at last. Without a word, she turns and advances into the hallway, every step measured and certain. Behind her, the closed courtroom doors thud softly, sealing off a chapter of unquestioned power. Ahead lies a corridor awash with chatter, a current of hope, doubt, and newfound resolve. In that charged atmosphere, one undeniable truth takes root. No badge, no uniform, no tradition of silence can stand in the way of the law when it chooses to speak. Today, the system has answered to the people, and above all, to justice. The moment the courtroom doors closed on Officer Stanton, the story exploded across every screen. Within minutes, videos of the kick, sharp and unforgiving, intercut with Nora. Steady calm were being shared and reshared under hashtags like courtroom justice and law above badge. Comment threads swelled overnight. Civil rights advocates praised the courage it took to hold even uniform power to account, celebrating Nora's insistence that every citizen, young or old, deserved due process. At the same time, critics decried anti-police sentiment, warning that one high-profile arrest could erode law enforcement morale nationwide. News outlets ran round-the-clock analysis panels. Legal scholars debated whether the contempt citation might reshape courtroom decorum. Community leaders organized phone banks to ensure elders could even hear the story without wading through hostile headlines. For many seniors watching from home, the images once framed by decades of deference to badges proved startling, a judge's authority finally prevailing over an unchecked officer's brutality. Meanwhile, Nora Blake slipped away from the public eye, returning to her chambers in the quiet thunk of closing doors. There, beneath rows of case files and fading commendations, she sat alone with the gavel's echo still ringing in her memory. She reflected on how swiftly power can tip and how vital it is to temper it with accountability. In that hush, she understood that real checks and balances aren't forged in spectacle, but in the daily decision to stand firm even when no one is watching. The gavel's crack was more than a rebuke. It was a reminder that authority once unchecked cannot endure, and that justice when summoned demands vigilance. A week later, the city's municipal building was packed for a hastily called press conference. At the podium, the police commissioner, in starched uniform, announced a thorough, transparent internal review of Stanton's entire service record and unveiled mandatory sensitivity and de-escalation training for every sworn officer. Behind him, council members in tailored suits nodded gravely, proclaiming that today marked the beginning of renewed trust between law enforcement and the community. Outside the Grand Hall, activists and advocates pressed reporters for stronger measures. Independent civilian oversight boards with subpoena power, publicly accessible dashboards tracking every misconduct complaint and its outcome, and real enforceable penalties for officers who betray their oaths. A coalition of retired judges, clergy, and neighborhood leaders declared that training alone wouldn't suffice. What was needed was a fundamental shift in culture and true civilian authority over police budgets and discipline. Editorial pages lit up overnight. Some columnists argued Stanton's kick had been a regrettable anomaly, a single bad apple in an otherwise professional force. Others pointed to patterns of overreach and urged that Stanton's fall must be the catalyst for deep structural reform, not a way to move on without meaningful change. Town halls sprang to life across neighborhoods, senior centers in quiet suburbs, church basements in the heart of the city, even virtual forums, each brimming with questions about who truly holds power, who watches the watchers, and how to ensure that no uniform carries immunity. Through it all, Nora Blake remained publicly reserved. She submitted her reviews, signed directives, and quietly met with internal affairs and community liaisons, but offered no interviews or grand pronouncements. Still, every measure she set in motion, the review protocols, the training mandates, the citizen complaint reforms began unfolding across precincts. In whispered conversations and fiery debates, her presence lingered, a question unfading in community hearts and council chambers alike. When power confronts its own limits, who will answer and how will justice be served? By the time the leaves turned bronze, Nora Blake's decisive intervention had rippled far beyond Millstone's courthouse. Law schools from Boston to Los Angeles assigned the cases required, reading students parsing every moment from Stanton's sneer to the clip of his stunned retreat. Professors led spirited seminars on the balance of authority, using digital excerpts of the hearing to show how a single act of judicial courage can check systemic abuse. Meanwhile, Stanton found himself besieged by more than whispers in the hallways. An independent disciplinary board convened to examine decades' worth of his conduct. 3 former colleagues testified to incidents long swept under the rug. Civil suits arrived in his mailbox, one for excessive force in a duffel bag arrest, another for a wrongfully cited jaywalking citation that ended in slaps and bruises. His uniform, once pressed and gleaming, now hung untouched in evidence storage as lawyers picked apart every commendation he had ever received. Across neighborhoods where too many citizens had long learned to look away, Nora's stand felt like sunlight flooding a darkened room. Community centers held screening parties of the viral courtroom footage. Survivors of misconduct wept in solidarity, their stories finally finding an audience. Advocacy groups built coalitions demanding that every police department adopt the Blake Protocol for civilian review and transparent misconduct tracking. For law enforcement agencies, the message was unmistakable. A badge does not bestow invulnerability. Training modules were rewritten. De-escalation exercises replaced drill sergeant tactics. Officers learned that confrontation without consequence breeds contempt for the very rule of law they're sworn to uphold. And in precincts where fear once ruled, a new ethic took root that protecting the vulnerable is the truest measure of public service. In the end, Nora Blake's decision to hold a colleague to the same standards she enforced as chief demonstrated a broader truth when institutions bow to principle instead of power. They reclaim their purpose and remind us all that justice once awakened cannot be turned away. Behind the sturdy oak doors of her chambers, Nora affixes a single framed word above her desk: accountability. It stands as her daily reminder that the work of justice never sleeps. Each morning she opens carefully stacked mail, handwritten thank you notes from mothers whose children once faced undue force, anonymous threats warning her to guard her silence. Neither cheers nor jeers deter her resolve. In recent months, dozens of former witnesses, once too frightened even to whisper their names, have returned to the stand with newfound courage. Their voices, once stifled, now ring clear in courtrooms, from Millstone to Miami. At every level of the system, judges and jurors speak openly of Stanton's case as a turning point, a moment when fear gave way to principle. Across the country, communities observe an annual No One Above the Law commemoration every April 14th, the anniversary of Stanton's contempt citation. In city squares and courthouse steps, lit candles and banners remind passersby that true safety lies not in unchecked power, but in equal treatment under the law. Local chapters of civic groups carry forward Nora's example, lobbying for transparent misconduct, dashboards, citizen review boards, and mandatory bias training for every badge. Even in departments once resistant to change, the ripple effect of Nora's stand is unmistakable. Chiefs who once prioritized swift arrests now speak of de-escalation, community outreach, and genuine accountability. Field training officers teach recruits that a restrained response followed by clear explanation earns respect far more reliably than intimidation. For everyday citizens, shopkeepers, school teachers, retirees, the renewed trust in justice is tangible. Parents no longer hesitate to call 911 when they see trouble, knowing they too will be protected rather than presumed guilty. And jurors come forward with stories of how they once doubted but now view every shielded badge with healthy skepticism, ready to hold it to the same standard as any private citizen. In Nora's own quiet way, the chambers behind her bear witness to a movement born of one bold act. She may no longer step into that courtroom to silence a bully, but the single word on her wall, accountability, continues to guide an entire nation toward a more just tomorrow. A few years down the road, the morning sunlight still filters through the courthouse windows, but the atmosphere has changed. Police departments across the state now publish detailed conduct records online, and every precinct hosts a quarterly civilian oversight meeting where residents, officers, and local leaders sit side by side at long folding tables. City council chambers display simple plaques commemorating justice in action, reminders that accountability isn't a one-time event but an ongoing promise. At police academies, recruits learn from the Millstone model, studying courtroom footage and community feedback protocols as core parts of their training. In small towns and big cities alike, retired and active officers speak of that fateful day in Millstone as the moment when the scales truly tipped. They recall how the image of a badge snapped shut in the dock became a symbol not of shame but of renewal, a reminder that no one stands above the law. Community centers now offer workshops on knowing your rights, and older neighbors who once spoke in hushed tones about unfair stops now share their stories aloud, confident that someone is listening. Meanwhile, advanced students in law school debate the fine line between authority and overreach, citing the Millstone case alongside landmark decisions from decades past. Judges at every level reference Blake's courage in their own rulings, reinforcing the principle that courtroom power must bow to justice. And in neighborhoods where distrust once ran deep, local police captains host monthly coffee hours at the corner diner, not to lecture, but to listen, earning back the faith that had been eroded by years of unchecked force. The legacy isn't perfect, no system ever is, but the promise endures when those who hold power remember that their first responsibility is to the vulnerable. Then justice becomes more than a word. It becomes the living, breathing heart of a community. And so Millstone's story closes, not on a final verdict, but on the lasting truth that real reform takes years and sometimes generations, but it always begins with one person willing to hold the line. This story reminds us that power must always answer to justice, and anyone, even those in uniform, can be challenged when they abuse authority. The message is that each of us holds the power to affect change simply by speaking out and refusing to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. Now I encourage you to reflect and share your personal viewpoint. Have we done enough to oversee those in power? Do we believe similar abuses could be prevented if communities remain silent? Please comment below with your predictions on when racism will truly end in our everyday lives. Will it end when every institution becomes fully transparent, or only when each of us takes responsibility for our words and actions? Share both your hopes and your concerns. Is our society heading in the right direction, or do we need bolder steps? Every opinion matters to underscore the importance of public protest, equality, education, and civilian oversight. When you speak up, you help build justice today and plant the seeds for a future generation unafraid to confront injustice.